If you enjoy Draw and Paint What You Regret on YouTube and would like to show your support, you can find Cash App and Venmo information below. By all means, this channel is free to watch and learn from. Enjoy! Hey everyone, so I am back with another demo. So this is part 3 of our watercolor pencil demo. What I want to do is just talk a little bit about the next few process. So in this third process, the one thing that you want to focus on is trying to figure out a plan of what needs more detail, what needs more color. So we're in a stage of color and detail. So it's always great to take some time out to look at your actual composition in your painting, and kind of figure out what needs more work, what doesn't need more work. So looking at my piece, I know I need to work in my background, get a little simultaneous contrast happening, get it a little bit darker on this side so this side of the apple look lighter. I might put in a little bit more mid-tone on this side, but we still want our shadow side to look dark because we want it to be in shadow. So I actually want to get more detail in my table ground because I feel like it's kind of one consistent color and it's falling very gray. So there's a little bit more of contrast that I want to get in the background and also table ground. Another thing that I want to do is I want to work on some of these muddy areas, and I'm going to use my pencils with that. So my goal is to push and pull, activating the pigment from the pencils as well as leaving my marks or my strokes, or you can say my hatching lines. So I'm going to use my pencils to kind of correct some of these muddy areas. And if you're like, girl, what is a muddy area? So if you are mixing too many colors at one time, it can run into your pigment looking muddy. So it's just a brown neutral color. So and what happened, I know what happened, I wasn't really paying attention to the properties of the pencils that I was picking up, and I wasn't thinking about, okay, what is the mix or the make of this pencil when it comes to colors. So you have to kind of pay attention to that, because sometimes, say you have a red, there can be two different types of reds. You can have a red that leans more towards the cool side, meaning that it has more blue in it, or you have a red that leans more towards the yellow side, and that means that it has more of a yellow or orange in it. So you want to think about your color theory. You want to think about your trio of primary colors. If you are mixing colors and you tend to mix your trio, all three of your primaries, that's going to run into a neutral or a muddy color. And that's what happened in this area. I was mixing too many colors, wasn't really paying attention, and I ended up running into kind of some muddy shadow shapes. Is that a bad thing? It depends on the artist. For me, I'm not a fan of what it looks like. So I'm going to do my best to fix it and get a little bit more color in it versus it being brown. I don't want it to be brown because I'm not seeing brown. I'm seeing other colors in my still life in front of me. So I definitely want to correct that with my pencils. Same thing on this side. Also, I want to think about light larger principles. So right now I have a clear separation of light part and dark part. I don't really have a core, don't really have a reflected light just yet. I do have a highlight, I do have some mid-tones. Same thing in my apple. I do want to get in a core. I think once I get my core in, that's going to help me with some reflected lights. Same thing in this box. I want to get a little bit more of different oranges in the light mask, as well as I want to fix my shadow shapes. So taking out some time to kind of figure out, okay, what is my next step? What do I need to do to help the composition or the painting looks better? It's always great to do that ahead of time. That way you know where you're going and what you need to do for your next few steps once you have glazed everything. So when it comes to my background, I definitely want to keep my background to have a little bit of a watercolor look to it. So I've already pre-mixed at least a dark and mid-tone kind of background color. And this kind of leans a little bit more on the warm gray side. And I got a little bit of examples so you get an idea of it. So I was mixing my colors earlier on a scrap sheet of paper, and this is kind of the warm cool gray, not warm cool gray. This is the kind of warm gray that I'm looking for. Girl, get it together. So I have a darker shade and also a lighter shade that I think is going to make a little bit more sense with getting more mid-tones and more darks in that background and also on my table ground. So I definitely want to talk a little bit about my palette again. This time, instead of me coming in with putting pigment on a scrap sheet of paper, activating the pigment and then putting it in drippings of water, what I decided to do, I don't know if you guys can see this, but I broke up some of my color pencils. I sharpened them and then broke them up, the watercolor pencils, and then I just dropped them into the water and allowed them to dissolve. I used my brush to kind of really get the pigment to dissolve, and it takes some time. If you're going to do it this way with using these kind of little crumbs or breaking off pieces off of your pencils, it takes some time to dissolve in water, so just give yourself that time if you're going to do that. I decided to do this because I wanted to have more pigment in my water. I love having a lot of pigment just kind of ready to go if I need it, to where I don't have to worry about doing too much mixing. I love to pre-mix if you haven't noticed that yet in any of my demos. So once again, I am going to use my watercolor pencils. I am going to use a little bit of my watercolor pencil pigment that's already activated to kind of get in my background. So I'm going to push and pull that idea. So we're going to see some areas where you'll see pencil strokes. You're going to see some areas where you're going to see no pencil strokes. It's going to look like paint, and that's the plan. So I think I talked about everything. The materials are all the same. So if you watch part 1 and 2, you have an idea of the materials that I'm using. If you are an advanced watercolorist, you could definitely just fast forward to the demo, but I'm gonna go ahead and be quiet and get started. Now you guys have an idea of what I'm going to do. All right, guys, see you guys in the next clip. Bye.